morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And it's funny, I was talking to the mics, as I call them, a few weeks after my campaign. And a campaign's a little bit like an entrepreneurial experience. You're never quite sure what's going to happen. It has its highs and lows. And sometimes you don't have an opportunity to reflect on that experience. And what I've learned is that I do like doing presentations. And a presentation is a great way to kind of put that experience together. Right? So you guys are guinea pigs today, except for Nick, who I'm going to leave on his own over there. see, I'm going to share my experience with you. And a couple of things I'd ask you to think about in the course of the conversation is, for those of you who are entrepreneurs, think about, and I'm a serial entrepreneur, about kind of the journey, because there's a journey here as well. And you'll see analogies like, running a campaign, especially if you've been a startup person. What's the product you're selling when you first start? Yourself. And when you're a politician, that is the only product you have. And you raise money, right? And you build, advisory boards and volunteers. And as I like to say, when you're doing an early stage startup, many of your first employees are more like volunteers. Try that when you're trying to get help. Anyway, so you are guinea pigs. I tried to do this visually because hopefully I'll make it more interesting. So let me know what you think. As I said, this is my first election. I was appointed for 2 years as a city council person when Terry Tornick got elected mayor, which is actually a great opportunity to try before you buy. Because in many ways, you'll see an election's a huge amount of work, and imagine if you got there and you didn't really like doing it. Right? So I got to know that I really enjoyed being a city council person. And I think the narrative here is being a candidate is very different than being a city council person. Like running a campaign, frankly, I didn't know that. So one of the aha moments is, my first rodeo. I'm not a cowboy, but I felt the rodeo concept was a good one. I felt like this sometimes in my campaign, hanging on for dear life. And you'll see why. So this is a picture, I hate this picture of the bow tie, but this got picked up in Pasadena in August, late August, just before Labor Day. I was going to announce my campaign, and a competitor announced beforehand, so I pre-announced. And I'm, smiling, thinking, hey, I'm going to be a candidate. This is going to be fun. And people ask me why I ran, and I will tell you that because I think, to me, it's a little bit like running a company and starting a company. I always ask entrepreneurs, and Pat's an angel investor, you probably ask the same question. Why did you start this company? Because I think the reason why is what keeps you going. Right? And my interest in politics is really kind of a byproduct of being a passionate community servant in Pasadena for 20 years. And Innovate Pasadena is actually part of that. I had lived in a dozen different cities before coming to Pasadena and really wanted to settle down and find a place called home. And 20 years ago, believe it or not, I built a spreadsheet and wanted to find the best place to live in America, and Pasadena came on top. It was close with Palo Alto, and if you kind of think about those two places, very similar. And once you decide you're going to live in one place for 20 years, service makes a lot of, huge amount of sense. Because you're going to be here forever, so the good work you do, like helping build Innovate Pasadena, Mike and I helped bring Cross Campus here. I didn't want to have that meet up at Jones's forever. We're benefiting from those things we build for ourselves, our friends benefit, and our children will hopefully benefit. So community service, and my dogs are front whining sometimes. That's Gandalf. You'll see him in some of the photos. So service makes sense if you imagine a long-term commitment to a place. So I've been volunteering in various capacities for 20 years, and city council seemed like a logical way to contribute. And one of the things that got me excited about city council is, as Mike mentioned, I'm hugely passionate about innovation and innovation economy. And there are not a lot of people in government who understand that. And making sure the policies and perspectives of innovation are brought into the way we think about government is super important, and I try to advocate for that every day. So that was one of the reasons that I got involved. So here's my banner at my kickoff event. Still really kind of, things are going well. We hired, by the way, I should mention, Mike Schaefer's team at Echo Factory helped us in a lot of marketing sides. So marketing is super important, as you imagine, running a campaign. Photos we took, I look almost presidential there, don't I? Family photo with the dog. It's interesting, the reason I showed the family photo up front is you'll see running a campaign becomes so consuming. If you have a family and you're going to run for political office, it's like starting a company. Enlist your family, because if you don't have your support, you'll fail. Right? If you start a company and you're giving it 110%, your family needs to be behind you, because you're working at night, you're working on weekends, and I'll tell you, running a political campaign is the same. Okay, so I remember people were asking me about when I was going to run, and frankly, this is one of the good moves I made. After we had a family vacation last summer, and I spent time at the end of the summer and said, hey, I think I would like to run for office. Let's talk about that would look like. And I would like your support. So my family was supportive, and I think little did they know what they were getting into. Lots of events. This is a kickoff event. If you probably recognize Pat Delacuno, Pasadena Angel, at that event. Events are really important to connect with constituents. This is a coffee. We did 15 neighborhood coffees. We sent 3,000 invitations to neighborhood members and elected people who vote. About probably 150 showed up to neighborhood coffees. One thing I'll just give you in terms of context. So District 7, just to describe it, is kind of Arroyo Parkway is the west boundary, Colorado's the north, San Marino is the south, and it goes to Sierra Madre. So it's PCC, Caltech, Langham, South Lake, Playhouse District. 21,000 people, 10,000 voters, but only 3,500 will vote in the election. So I'm targeting not the 21,000 residents, because they don't vote. It's a little bit like marketing in your company, right? You have a lot of customers, but who's likely to buy? So I want to focus on the 10,000 that are registered voters, but guess what? Only about 30 or 40% will vote in the municipal elections. And you can look at voter data and figure out who those people are. Right? So even though every person in your residence is a constituent, they're not all voters. And when you're pressed for time, figuring out who's likely to vote is a very important part of the strategy. So when we engage people, we would always send people, we'd pull voter files and look at voter behavior and target those people who are most likely to vote. Right? Because otherwise you're kind of spending your time on people who are not going to move the agenda for you. So events are really important. I pulled some events. So after the primary, so there was a primary on March 7th, and you needed to get 50%, otherwise there was a runoff. I was fortunate to obviously make it to runoff. I got the endorsement of the number 3 winner, Alex Menchaca, and number 5 winner, I'm just spacing on her name right now, Sheena. Yes, thank you, Sheena. And here they are at a launch event, Sheena and Alex, kind of once again having fun together. Branding is important. Where's Mike? Call it for Mike. So our website logo, we create original artwork, right? And you think about what does brand stand for. We came up with a slogan, good neighbor, dedicated leader, right? So this becomes part of your strategy. So once again, think about this is a mini startup, right? Campaign, a lot of printing. And I'll talk about campaign finance a little bit, but we printed 20 pieces over the course of 6 months, right? And any District 7 voters, you probably got 20 pieces in your mailbox over 6 months. And I think the people who win most in an election are probably the printing companies and the U.S. Postal Service. But you can see, and part of this is showing you kind of the brand we tried to build, right? The brand of Andy and what I stand for. Strengthening our future, preserving our way of life. Right? Kind of thinking about how we're bringing the past, relate our past and what makes Pasadena great to the future we all want to have. Right? It's not kind of this nostalgic view, but it's a view of thinking about what's extraordinary in Pasadena and making sure that's relevant to the next generation. Video, right? This is pretty serious video. We did a, does anyone recognize this gentleman here? Anyone familiar with the Space Apps Challenge? Oh, we meant the Space Apps. Anyway, the Space Apps Challenge is a big NASA challenge. Joe Brisbrough runs that, and he's really good at video. So we used to say, volunteered and brought his crew, and we did a bunch of video. I won't bore you with that, but video was important. Yard signs, anyone see yard signs when the campaign was going on? Yeah. It's weird that people think it makes a difference. And some campaign strategies doesn't really make that much difference. I can tell you when I see my friends like, oh my God, that guy has more yard signs than X Street. What's going on? So a lot of people get really excited about yard signs. And I think they're easy for people to relate to. More campaign mail. I got a lot of endorsements. Mayor Beauregard was our mayor before Terry Tornick. I endorsed for our Congresswoman Judy Chu, our state senator at Summerman. So a lot of people got behind my campaign. A really important part of my strategy. Those are all endorsements of community leaders, right? I mean, you spend 20 years building community, you get a lot of people behind you, right? I always like to say, and it's quoting not necessarily my favorite politician, but I think it's a great quote. It takes a village to run a campaign. It really takes a village. These are all people who came behind. Knocking on doors. If you ever want to run for local office, buy 3 or 4 comfortable walking shoes. And I knocked on, and I'll share the stats with you, over 3,000 doors and talked to over 2,000 people in their doorway. Okay, I think that was 120 miles of walking over a 6-month period. I put a little snapshot in here. It's not a great screenshot, but you use mobile technology to guide you to those houses where those high propensity voters are. Okay, so you can use mapping. It knows where you are and it tells you what. No, don't ring that doorbell. Oh, ring that doorbell. Right. So technology and GPS really makes the world of kind of going door to door canvassing much easier. And by the way, when you ring the doorbell, and I talk to Michael, and Michael says, "Hey, nice to see you. And what are you concerned about? What are you concerned about?"
Education.
Education. I said, Michael's really concerned about education. He doesn't really like our school board or something, and worried about pension reform. Let's just say that's a conversation. When I move from his house, I can pick up the app, and I'll make a voice note that says, you're concerned about education, let's say school reform. Then the next week, I'll trigger a letter and say, hey, it was great meeting you. I really appreciate your concerns about those 2 issues. And the letter will be personalized about what I said at his doorstep. Okay? So connecting with people, one-on-one marketing using technology. Another important aspect, volunteers. We had volunteers rallying at my house every Saturday for about 3 months, and then Saturday and Sunday for 6 weeks, both days. We were fortunate. I had the support of the firefighters and the police. This happens to be a day we had a lot of firefighters. I had over 100 volunteers work on my campaign and put forward more than 5,000 volunteer hours. And you'll see one of the stats I give is they ate more than 100 pizzas and I think 500 donuts. So volunteers are powered by pepperoni, especially pepperoni pizza apparently, and glazed donuts. So we finally got to the primary. As I mentioned, there's Sheena and there's Alex. There were 5 candidates in the primary. And I worked hard, and I frankly barely won the primary. You can see I had 1,063 votes and got 44%. Phil Haas was in second place, just 58 votes behind me. You need 50% to win, right? So guess what that means for me? 6 more weeks of campaigning between me and Phil, right? Because 5 months wasn't enough fun. And I like to say, I did lose about 10 pounds, and people might know that Mike Mills is my trainer. I'm not sure if I give Mike credit or the campaign credit for losing 10 pounds. Synergy. Perhaps the stress of the campaign as well. So then we got a run opposite me and Phil Haas, the 2 finalists. We'll talk about that. So Phil ran a different campaign. Hopefully you have a good concept of what my campaign looked like, between the events and the volunteers and mail. This is Phil's website. Maybe not quite as marketing oriented. Notice he has 2 tabs at the top of his webpage dedicated to me. Wilson's Conflicts and Wilson's Not-for-Profit. Do you know what Wilson's Not-for-Profit is? Innovate Pasadena. So he tries to spin Innovate Pasadena as a Clinton Foundation. Right? This is kind of in Mike here, who's the president of Innovate Pasadena, and one of my co-founders, we're like, we've been volunteer board members and no one's ever been paid. But once again, this is political strategy at work. does political strategy work? So I'm going to talk a little bit about his campaign so we can talk about political strategy. This is one of his first mailers. I'll read it to you. Days after Wilson was appointed to city council, his close associates began the process of building an $87 million condo project in our district. And it says at the bottom, influence peddling. So once again, Phil is painting the fact that I have a relationship, actually, with this gentleman, Greg McElmore, who's another volunteer board member with me in Innovate Pasadena. So the fact that Greg and I sit on Innovate Pasadena board is leading him to tell people that that relationship is resulting in kind of unfair or kind of advantage for these projects. So kind of playing to the sense of, oh, government people are corrupt. Okay, this corruption angle is being played out. And you can see in this document, he has a timeline and money changing hands. So this is, once again, his political strategy. I'm the incumbent, I've been working, once again, his strategy is, if you're an incumbent, by definition, you're corrupt, and he's going to play to that fear. Same group, this is the same project. Wilson wasn't honest with us, so he has a bunch of doctors who are in that building who are not happy that the developer who bought that building has a legal right to expand the building. They were worried about construction going on. I understand that. But their worries don't still allow someone to have property rights to expand and build an expansion in a parking lot. Then Phil takes his strategy online. Andy Wilson tried to quit. This is when I was appointed. I interviewed for some jobs, and he's like, well, you'd have to quit if you took those jobs. Those jobs were never pursued, and certainly were off the table when I put my name on the ballot. Wilson's not-for-profit received $95,000. Did a media campaign about the city is a partner in Innovate Pasadena, as is JPL and Caltech and Art Center. But once again, his narrative is Wilson's putting city money in his own pet project, like the Clinton Foundation. Okay, so playing into the sense of cynicism of, hey, he's lining his pocket. Learn about Wilson's influence peddling. So once again, online media ads. You probably saw Phil's these things if you were in social media during the campaign, popping up all the time, right? I didn't show you our ads, but they're very much, proven leader, save trees. So ours were more about kind of policy. His campaign is very much around playing into the cynicism. He also created a website called Sketchy Andy Wilson. And you can see, this is me in fire training, conflict scandals, so on and so forth. Facebook page, Sketchy Andy Wilson. So we didn't do that. We didn't do that. But we did end up doing a fact check page around, for instance, in Innovate Pasadena, as I mentioned, where it's 100% volunteer driven. It's driven by a bunch of institutional members. No board members ever been paid, but suddenly he's spinning it as his kind of vehicle of the Clinton Foundation that your taxpayer dollars are going into. We have to explain all that. And it's hard to unexplain something when someone has told you and put kind of a concept in your head. Okay. I also learned that something called slander and libel laws don't really apply to public officials. And if you read, once again, it's very difficult to prove because they have to prove actual malice, and there's a whole standard around slander and libel. So what you need to do and how you protect yourself as a public figure is very different than what you can do as a private citizen, right? So you're like, wow, what can you do about this stuff? And really, it's not much. Not much. So anyway, that was an interesting experience. Debates. Actually, I love the debates, right? Because I've been working in the city on policy issues for 20 years. So it's fun to talk about job creation and alternative mobility and where development takes place. So those are fun. Picture order, one re-election. You sitting next to me in that debate. Here's me and Phil. We wanted to have two debates for the runoff, and Phil refused to do that. He finally agreed to do one debate as long as it was less than 5 days before election day, right? Because he didn't want it to be too close to when people were still figuring out how to vote. Because Phil, who, from what I can tell, is a nice guy, but had never done any community service in our city in any way, shape, or form. So when you get to debate, it's very hard to talk about issues if you've never been involved in any of the issues, right? So he was very reluctant to debate. So he was not eager to debate, but fortunately agreed to do one debate. This is what I thought the election was going to look like. I kind of thought it would be a little more friendly. So this is election day. And I go back to where I started. As you maybe could tell, this is a very intense 6 months of my life. And small narrative I'll say is, one reason I took up community services, I had a startup project that didn't turn out very well. And so I thought, let's do something really positive and get involved in community service. And needless to say, it wasn't quite as joyful all the time as I hoped. But this ended up kind of being a real challenge and eye-opener. And my family, once again, this is election day on April 18th or 17th, whenever the final was. And we're at 6 a.m. in the morning. My son is doing his duty with one of those glazed donuts I mentioned. And we're about to hang door hangers on the morning to remind people to help. Go out and vote. Go out and vote. Okay? I voted for myself, so at least I knew I was going to get one vote. How do you think it turned out? That's me on election night. It happens to be my parents sitting in front of me in City Hall, and my wife behind me. We won by a resounding, what the number is, 34 votes, or whatever the number is, 24 votes. 36 votes. After all that work. And by the way, we were behind 20 votes. That picture I showed you was a few days after Election Day. On Election Day, we were behind 20 votes, and there were 340 votes that hadn't been counted. And so we were behind 20 votes. And it took a week for them to do the final count. I want to make sure I'm watching your time here. And people were asking, how do you feel, Andy? You're behind and you may win, or may lose. More importantly, you may lose. And what I told people is that was the most content period of the whole election. It's like the die has been cast. We gave it literally 110%. I don't get we had 110%. In fact, we also didn't do anything that I would regret talking about or regret doing. And so I knew worst case, we were going to lose with dignity. And best case, we'd win. And so I felt like people were like, aren't you anxious? And I literally was not anxious at all. I was happy to win. And so that week later when they counted the final votes. Since I'm an engineer, I wanted to share a few stats. So as I mentioned, we had over 100 volunteers who did more than 5,000 hours, 100 pizzas. I knocked on 3,000 doors, talked to 2,000 people. I personally spent over 1,000 hours on the election campaign in 6 months. I walked 120 miles. The volunteers walked 268 miles. We spent 70,000 pieces of mail. We personally sent those follow-up letters I talked about to Michael. We sent 13,000 personalized letters and invitations. 22,000 people reached on Facebook. My campaign spent $200,000. Huge amount of money. Most of that was mail printing, right? And I would argue that I'm not convinced that, I think we oversaturated in mail, but that's a different conversation. And then we had 300 donors who helped make up for that $200,000. By the way, my competitor raised about $175,000 from about 30 donors. Right? So it was a different model for him. Most of the money was lent to his campaign by himself and his father. A couple highlight photos. This is one of my favorites. That's my 12-year-old son, and he's phone banking to get people to come out and vote. I love that photo. And this is a firefighter with his 5-year-old son walking precincts. And then we did win, so we had an election party. And part of the campaign is to make new friendships. So I became, through the campaign, very good friends. People know who this is, Congresswoman Judy Chu. She's been a great supporter, and I thank her for all she's done. So, a few quick observations for myself is you have to decide if you're running a campaign what your style is going to be. And as somebody who's a community builder, mine was very much around issues and embracing people, including people. Phil's was a little different. It was very much an attack. You know, the world is falling, a fear-driven, you know, we're going to screw our city up, and Wilson's behind that. Mine was low-key, brought the dog, you know, cooked hot dogs, so on and so forth. Phil has a military background. You could feel the intensity. This is him in uniform. This is Phil, my competitor. You could feel that military intensity and discipline. And it's a different style. Another observation I would say is about strategy. And I'll read this cartoon panel to you. Our strategy is to detect any trends and react accordingly. Second panel, isn't that exactly the same as not having a strategy? Third panel, hey, this slide didn't make itself in the sense that you had a strategy. And I think I would ask myself, is we did more work, and I think my campaign, being reflective about it, we could have pulled up, and it's hard when it's your first startup, imagine, or my first rodeo as a campaign person, is to figure out the strategy if you've never been on the journey. Right? Not a campaign strategist, but I felt like he was more producing mail and, you know, producing material versus saying, what is the field, what's the plan to win? Okay. You're running out of time, Mike? In our strategy, these are, I thought this is the Russian troops in Afghanistan, okay? And they're lining up tanks, and then they run into the Afghan mujahideen and the local fighters, and they end up like that. And I think if I were to look at myself, we had a very predictable strategy. We're running our campaign against somebody who is much more guerrilla, and it's like guerrilla marketing. We ran a very traditional marketing kind of playbook campaign, and we ran against somebody who was much more creative and aggressive, right? So that's really important. And where do these strategies come from? And if you track the national debate, probably know this guy. Does anyone know Bannon? Yeah. So he is the strategist for Donald Trump, right? He was the guy who kind of figured out how to kind of make things happen. And I found out Phil had a strategist, a guy named Martin Truitt, who's also that type of very aggressive, creative, and intense person to help come up with these campaigns. Okay? And when I asked myself, what are the messages they carry, this is Bannon's quote. I think anger is a good thing. Okay, that's one of his quotes. This is Martin Truitt's quote when he interviews candidates. You need to be mean to win. Okay? And when I was on a debate with Phil Haas, he literally said in the final debate, is I need to sling mud to win. And I guess I would ask myself, and we didn't play that game, but you think about someone like Phil Haas who'd never been, just moved to Pasadena, never been involved in how effective kind of negative campaigning and these kind of very aggressive campaign tactics can be. Right? And the reason I ask you that is because I want you to think about if you're ready to run for office, we all have choices we need to make. Right? And do you really want to win, and at what cost? And what will you do to win? And I think some of those choices play out when we're running startups too. Right? There are always things where we can look for shortcuts, for things that matter. But we ask ourselves, what is our own moral compass? Okay? And so, this is me with a bunch of the retirement home with firefighters. This is the image I have of the politician in community service. But I think in many cases, this is more of the battle that we see in the political realm, right? And so, if you were thinking about running for elected office, you have to ask yourself, do you have the temperament? Do you have the temperament? And is this, for you? And I'm not here to discourage people. I'm saying that I wish someone had given me this presentation before I had run for office. And it's like when I meet with entrepreneurs, I give them the same presentation about entrepreneurship. They read the books, they see the pictures, they see Zuckerberg, they see Snapchat billionaires. And I always tell people, there's nothing more important than being entrepreneurs, but you need to know what that journey is to prepare yourself. And I would say the same is true for political service. There's nothing more important than political service, but you need to prepare yourself so that you are, when you commit yourself and go on that journey, that you are ready, psychologically, emotionally, physically, and your family is ready. Because if you're going on that journey, it's one of those things, once you're in, it's hard to get out. So I'm going to, with that, thank you.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure to hear from Andy Wilson. His perspective on entrepreneurship and also the political process at the local level is incredible. I had the intense pleasure actually working with him. I was one of the volunteers. Made a little bit of a workout. I sprinted from door to door to deliver as many door hangers as I possibly could. But I'm really grateful for the outcome, and I'm really enjoying the perspectives that you've learned and just really tactful follow through. And highlighting and reflecting on the entire experience. And I'm sure, I mean, in my mind, as I watch this presentation, I'm thinking about how we're all trying to get into the marketplace, and we all have our own campaigns as such, as entrepreneurs, and it's trying to come up with strategy that conveys a message that is also heartfelt and sincere, but sometimes you work against opposition that is a little bit more, as you said, creative. And how do we deal with that? So we're going to open up to Q&A now. If you have questions for Andy, please raise your hand. John will walk around with the mic. If your statement does not end with something like a question mark, please save it for offline. I'm sure Andy will be hanging out with us for a little bit, so you can share stories with him then. Thank you.
Can I do a quick survey? Hold on. So the survey is, first of all, is any in this room ever contemplating running for elected office? So maybe half. And I guess my question is, of that group, did this scare you off, or did this kind of feel like, it's a little bit like entrepreneurship, feel like it scared you off? No. I mean, I think my goal, by the way, is not to scare people off. And same thing with entrepreneurship, is my goal is to kind of allow people to self-select and qualify themselves to prepare for the journey, right? And that, I just want to make sure my message, what I'm trying to have you come away from is not, this is just the nature of the beast. It's like when I tell people, oh, poor puppy. Thanks, Mike. When I tell people, and you probably do this, Pat, in the funding world, is it's hard to get funding for a startup. And it doesn't mean you should build your startup. What you want people to do is understand the nature of the challenge so they can tool themselves to prepare for the journey. Okay, so sorry, let's take some questions.
Thanks for sharing a great presentation. And your point just leads to my question to you. If you had listened to this presentation before, how would that have impacted you? And second of all, do you think and if you had been second in the primary, would that have changed your tactics, or would you look at it differently?
So someone had given me this talk beforehand. I probably still would have won. I think for me, which was most eye-opening, was the disconnect between my expectation and reality. Right? If someone said, hey, I'm like, okay, great, it's going to be rough, and we're going to get bruised up, and it's going to be bloody, then I probably would have had it. But I'm kind of, people who know me well, I'm a super positive, community-based giver. And I think I'm committed to service in our city, but I wasn't prepared for people who would fight with very sharp elbows. Right? And I think, so the answer is I probably still would have won. But for me, it was kind of real eye-opener. It's probably if you don't have a realistic view of a startup and suddenly you're the founder and you're taking a home loan to make payroll and your wife's like, what the F? Right? So that's why I tell people what the journey is going to look like so they don't end up with the what the F. It's more like, oh yeah, that kind of sucks, but I kind of expect that to happen. I'm sorry, your second question.
If you'd been second in the runoff, would that have changed your tactics?
So, no. I think what would have changed my tactics, knowing what I know from this presentation, is it was very clear what type of campaign Phil Haas was going to be running. And I kind of had to unpeel the onion every day, rather than saying, okay, here's his campaign, what is our campaign? Right? So we kept doing mail, we had lots of good execution, but I didn't feel like we pulled up to say, what's the nature of the enemy, so to speak. And I hate to even use that word because I feel like we're all servants. I mean, it tells you about, Phil's military guy, he knows about enemy. I feel like, hey, maybe you don't get elected here, maybe I'll appoint you to a commission, right? So I think, I wish I'd known that texture, but I don't think I definitely wouldn't have gone the direction he went. But we had people who were very ardent about our campaign, who dug up a lot of dirt about Phil Haas that would have been just as incriminating, and I refused to publish it.
Good man.
Yes.
aphorism in politics that if you're explaining, you're losing.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the most powerful example to me was looking like John Kerry getting swift voted, and I think there's almost consensus that by him keeping his eyes up here and not addressing that was one of his fatal flaws in his campaign. And obviously the last campaign, I think where Donald Trump just systematically attacked sort of the characters of each of his opponents, and again they all sort of kept their eyes high. They talked about the issues, and then one by one they fell by the wayside. So certainly there's a balance there. I think it's interesting you said you did have like a tab that addressed the attacks. You didn't go with the opposition research. You could have gone with him. So how did you strike that balance? Because I do see a lot of examples where keeping your eyes high and being positive was the downfall of the candidate.
And it could have been my downfall. It wasn't. It was helped by 36 votes. It's a hard balance, and I do think you can't ignore it. And I think what it also tells you is, and I had a second part of this presentation, we didn't have time for it, is most people who are involved in the political process it's very tangential. Like we have our daily lives, and they're kind of like, oh, I got to vote. There are very few people who really pay attention to what happens in City Hall every day. And so, as a byproduct of that, and what surprised me was that there's kind of a lack of knowledge, which leads to a slight sense of cynicism. And so the negativity can catch hold quite easily. Like, oh man, so let me give you, I can imagine Phil Haas rings the doorbell. Like, hey, yeah, my name's Phil Haas. No idea if this is true, but what do you think about all the traffic in Pasadena? Oh, I fucking hate it. What about those ugly buildings in Walnut? Oh yeah, he's like, Andy Wilson, he's entitled to all those buildings, and the reason he's doing that because he's friends with all those developers and he's getting kickbacks. And let's just say that's the only conversation you have about elections. You're like, well, I hate traffic and it's gotten worse. I saw those ugly buildings. That's a very simple explanation. You got my vote. So the question really is, how do we educate enough of the electorate in a way in the sense that they know that we have a general plan that talks about where density is and we have zoning, and it doesn't matter what I think, and in fact it's illegal for me to take kickbacks from any developer. I mean, it's what he just claimed in that little box scenario is simply not possible. I'd be in jail, right? But people don't know that, and he just want to vote, right? And if you knock on 4,000 doors and you tell that story one-on-one, it's really hard for me to undo that, right? So I'm telling you, negative campaigning is really hard to campaign against. And the question is, what do you do? And I can say, hey, you know what? Let me explain about how the zoning works and their eyes glaze over. People want simple answers to things they don't like. And I think negative campaigning goes to the lizard brain around why things suck in life. And if you can say it's the guy who's in office who's screwing her every day, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to save it. Thank you. You have my vote. So once again, it's a challenge. I don't have the answer, but as you know, it's true in entrepreneurship. Half the solution is asking the right question.
Right here.
Yeah.
So now that you've served a term after being appointed versus now you're starting to serve a term after being elected.
Right.
And it sounds like even though it was surprising what you encountered, you might run again for this or something else.
I think it's like childbirth. You probably forget how painful it was. But I don't know. I'll have to ask the ladies, but that's true.
So in terms of then how you're serving as a city council member, do you think that it'll change at all how, I mean, part of what you do as a community builder, do you think that you're going to change at all how you serve, or will it, in terms of having an eye towards running for something again, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the things that, I'll give you a tactical answer, is the first thing Phil's campaign did was do a public records request and get every email I ever sent or received from my city account. And they hired forensics people to go through it so they can start picking out parts of emails. And so now I'm a lot more careful about when I send an email. And it wasn't like anything was, hey, where's the money for the deal? It was more like, let me give you an example. I care about affordable housing in our city. And so I responded to some affordable housing applicants and say, and I said, we can never get, they said, what do you think about affordable housing? And I said, we can never get enough good housing in our city. So he takes that, in a campaign scene says, Wilson says that housing would be built at all costs, and he quotes my email. Okay? So just thinking about every piece of correspondence as public correspondence and how that may be reused or distorted is one of the things I have learned. And you got every expense report ever turned in. I mean, it's this kind of, there is a public records opportunity. And by the way, he still, last week, filed another public records request even though the campaign's over. So that has me just thinking about, you're kind of a little bit walking on eggshells. The good news is I think of myself as a highly moral person, so there's nothing I have to hide. But when you have 25,000 emails and someone can take 5 words out of context, I don't know how you police against that. I will say that to give, they ran a very good campaign, no question about it. They almost won, right? So I think you have to give them credit for running a kind of intense campaign that almost won for them. And so winning is the number one thing, then I think you can learn a lot from that. The question is, where are the boundaries and what will you do to win? I also think that keeping in touch, like I'm still walking and not ringing doorbells and logging, but I always think about, I've always been super available to constituents. And go back to the point I made earlier, is a lot of this kind of receptiveness to this negative news was really because of people not being well informed. So what I am working on is better ways to inform my electorate. Because I think if you inform people consistently, then they know that you didn't do something that was in their worst interest that was good for you, right? They kind of have an ongoing narrative rather than me denying that, I said to your point, it's like, oh, I didn't do the Swift vote or whatever didn't happen. So I think it's got to be an ongoing dialogue. So that piece is definitely, I always ask myself, is how do we do that better day to day?
Back here, Andy?
Yeah.
You won by a narrow margin.
Thank you for putting that out.
Okay. You spent more than he did.
Yeah.
He wasn't a person who's been in the community that long. He doesn't have a record of public service as you did. What do you think that says about the Pasadena voters, or at least your district, because it was so close?
Yeah, I think hopefully I kind of laid out the answer around that. A couple of things that do happen. People are not that well informed, and so when he goes door to door, and Phil did a great job knocking on doors to his credit. If I knocked on 3,000, he'd probably knock on 4,000. And if he tells that kind of slightly, hey, something's wrong in City Hall, we're going to drain the swamp, he does it with a credible face, and he's served and I have a lot of respect for his military service, that people are susceptible to that. Like the second thing I'll tell you is that of the people who vote, the 3,500 voters, the average voter age is around 62 or 63 years old. Okay, and what's interesting about being a policymaker is that the people who put you in office tend to be people who are older, who are thinking about the past. And I think the policy that we're making today really is most pertinent to the next generation. Right? What type of jobs are we going to have here? How are we going to get around our city? What are we going to do in terms of, access to education? I mean, when I'm 73 years old, it kind of doesn't matter anymore. And I think the interesting disconnect is that the people who put people in office, certainly in District 7, tend to be further along in life, and a lot of the more progressive issues, forward-looking issues, the ones I care about, are more relevant to the next generation, and they don't vote. They don't vote. So to your question, go back, is that we got to get the younger people whose voices really should matter, who often, because of they're being busy, don't have a seat at the table.
Time for one more?
Yeah, sure.
So you talked about strategy, and so clearly you leveraged all you know about entrepreneurship and building businesses because of very, very effective marketing strategy. But part one of the question is, did you hire on political savvy strategists as well? Was there a political strategy that married in with the marketing? And then what was your opinion about, aside from the scorch and burn from the cynical point of view of military politics, what do you perceive as his political strategy versus your political strategy? Because it was a brilliant marketing campaign.
Yeah, so I did have a political strategist, and I would say he's much more traditional. And the reason I show that kind of Afghan model is that we kept sending troops straight down the middle, and we had more resources. But when you have very creative people around you, you know, RPGing your tanks, and we keep sending more. At some point, Russia's lost in Afghanistan. If you didn't know. So my point is, I think when you have, and this is true in entrepreneurship and business in general, when you have people who are very clever, and I think Phil's guys were extremely clever, ruthless but clever. We did not come back and say sending more tanks straight up the middle is probably not a good. We just kind of kept going, and I think we, at the margin made some changes, but it was hard because I'd never been on the valley, in a tank before. So first experience, and I think I probably could have done a better job leveraging the experience of my strategy and other people, because it really felt like every day was like new day, it's Groundhog Day. Whoa, my God. Right? It's hard to have a strategy when you're like, oh my goodness, I've never been here before. How do I use the fork? I mean, it was just like really out of my element.
But it sounded like you kept with your marketing strategy. And
we did, and I think we should have
targeted.
Yeah, and that was more execution. It was more the messaging piece. I think we should have said, hey, you know what? I can think about different messaging around. He painted me as everything that was wrong with the city was me. I was appointed for 2 years. It's like it wasn't like I'm a 4-term, mayor of the city. Like, and part of this is, bringing new ideas to Pasadena, just getting started. Versus like, that's what I could have said. Versus like everything's bad, the legacy of Pasadena. Like anything you don't like, the fact that the gold line cuts through Pasadena, you have to wait. He put that on me. That was done 20 years ago. So in terms of politics, I think, by the way, interesting, it's nonpartisan, but both of us are Republicans. I definitely is more progressive. You see a lot of support from Democrats, because I'm very much about inclusion, right? I think if I had to characterize, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's definitely, he was make Pasadena kind of keep it great again, keep it great, more around protecting what we have, and I think we need to protect what we have while looking forward, right? That would be the distinction, right? I think he wants to protect what we have. I think we need to continue to thoughtfully iterate so that the next generation could be, frankly, as extraordinarily lucky as we are to live in one of the finest places in America. Okay. So, Pat, did you have one question? Okay, well, on that note, hopefully I didn't bore you. I know it's not really an innovation talk, but I thank you for allowing me to kind of share my experience with you. Thank you.